Hey guys, welcome to week number 2. So I think I mentioned last week how these videos would work. I think I might add a little bit where maybe I talk for a bit about what went on outside of class stuff last week. I know I mentioned to you guys I went to see Hidden Figures. Was pretty good. I really liked it, and it was kind of an interesting portrayal. I mean, it was a movie, for those of you that don't know, Hidden Figures was about these 3 African American women that worked in NASA during the time of the, now this is before the moon landing. This was back when they were trying just to get men into space. We were in the space race with Russia, and we're trying to get our men, America anyway, was trying to get our men up into space first. And it turned out we didn't. They got Russian up in space first, but the US became the first country to have a man orbit the Earth. And so this was the story of these 3 African American women who worked in the basically computing department. This was before actual computers, when computers still took up an entire room. So they had people doing these very crazy mathematical computations that I can't even pretend to understand. But these 3 women faced discrimination, not just because they were African American, which was their first and foremost the thing that they were discriminated against by, but even within their own race, they were kind of put down because they were women. There was a great scene that I really liked where one of the women was at a church picnic and told a guy that she was interested in that she worked at NASA, and she did all of these calculations for them, and he kind of laughed and said, "Sure you do," and she got ticked off with him and said, "I really do this kind of stuff." So it was really interesting to see that gender and race played a role for these women, and really relevant too, because the first man to orbit the Earth was John Glenn. So John Glenn was portrayed in this film, and he actually interacted with these women before he was taken up into space to go around the Earth. He was supposed to go around 7 times, I think it was, and he went around 3. And one of these women had to calculate where his re-entry point was and where he would land within a 20-mile margin of error, and she did. So it was really interesting. I highly recommend that movie. But on to other things. So my little divider here will send us into talking about what we did last week, which I personally had a lot of fun reading and watching your videos. So let's pause here and we will go on to talking about that. All right, so last week we jumped right into the theme of our course with your journal responses. Actually, wait, let me go back. Let's talk about those introduction videos first, so it won't take too long on those. Those were a real ball for me to watch. I enjoyed getting to know those of you that are new to my courses. I got to learn more about those of you that I worked with last semester. This environment really allows for, oddly enough, I feel it allows for a little bit more personal sharing, I guess, because we all feel maybe a little safer in our cocoons where we think, oh, I'm never going to see this person. They don't care what I say. They can judge me from a distance. So I learned a lot about those of you that I already knew, and I learned tons of stuff about those of you that I've never met, never had in a class before. So I believe the majority of our majors are elementary ed. I think someone was a business major. There may have been more than one business, and I also think we had some nursing people in the class. I may be getting my 2 classes mixed up. I hope not. But the majority of you are elementary ed. We had, let's see, I think we have 2 people expecting their first babies. So very excited about that, and I believe the 2 of you were within now know, a week or two of when we're expecting these new arrivals to arrive. So very much looking forward to you introducing us to these new bundles of joy in your life in the next week, 2, 3, whenever they decide to show up. So congratulations to those of you that are expecting your first child. What else did I like in the videos? There was a lot of very awkward awkward filming going on, not unlike what I do on these videos, but I've been doing this for maybe a year now, I think, and this is entirely new to most of you. So I will just encourage you by saying it gets less awkward. Hopefully even from the time that you started filming that first video, it was less awkward by the time you got to the end of it. I know some of you were praying for that 5 minutes to come, and as soon as it did, you said, and the end, goodbye. Don't feel you have to do that, but I do hope these videos become less weird for you to film. Really just think of it as though you're talking to someone on the other end. I at least watch these videos. I hope that the rest of you will watch each other's videos. If you want to feel as though someone cares about you, then the best way to do that is to care about other people and go ahead and watch their films too. So great job on those videos. Everyone did get to the 5-minute mark, despite no matter how awkward it might have been. A few of you kind of skimped out on the one question that I really did want answered, and that was the American Dream question. But the majority of you did answer that. So my one word of warning with the videos and with the journals too is always make sure you're answering the questions that are asked before you go and trail off into something else. Okay, so that was the videos. Great job on those. Keep it up. I'll be talking about how this week's video is going to go coming up in the next section of this video. For the journal responses that I started to talk about earlier and will conclude starting to talk about now, we jumped right into the theme of our course, the American Dream, by watching the very first episode ever made of Leave It to Beaver. And so it looks like everyone was able to access that perfectly, despite my technology things. And I know you guys got tons of emails from me last week about how to access the video and stuff. But you were responding to one of the 2 prompt options, and I really enjoyed reading through the responses. You'll notice with the videos and with the journals that I went back on everyone's posts on either one and made a comment of some kind. Sometimes I asked you a question, sometimes I just made a general observation. The one thing I will say is no one's going to get comments regarding your grade on something. So the comments I make on the WordPress are publicly acceptable, and if I need to comment to you on, you know, maybe push this response a little further, something that will show up on the comments part of our grade book. So I do have the video responses and journal responses graded. I'm going to be putting those grades up tonight. Those of you that had me last semester should be surprised by this. So I'm really trying hard this semester, turning over a new leaf, getting things graded. Hopefully I'll be able to keep this up, getting things graded fairly quickly with not a long turnaround time. So I'm going to, I don't know if I'll talk about let's talk about this. The prompt options. The first one was the individual definitions of the American Dream. So quite a few of you are children of immigrant parents, and maybe a couple of you are immigrants yourself. You came over to the U.S. when you were fairly young, so to you those memories may not have held from not being in the U.S., but your parents were able to give you some idea of American Dream, their American Dream. In the episode, though, that's what I asked you to do for that first prompt, was compare your American Dream to the episode's American Dream. A few of you struggled to kind of figure out what the episode's American Dream was. And the way you needed to think about this was, what does this family have? what seems to be important to them. So a lot of you were mentioning things like education and family in general, which is great. I really think that the family one was obviously very important. We had things like the children come home from school and the family eats dinner together. It's really something we don't do a lot anymore. Even in my own family, we often, well, actually, we have a dining room table, but we really use it to do work or pay bills on, you know, like we use it like a second office. So, well, a first office, don't have an office. So our dinner really consists of us eating in the living room in front of the TV. As I was growing up, we did do the whole eat a family dinner thing, TV's off, everyone's talking to each other. But times have changed. And so we don't even see most people doing the leave it to Beaver, eat as a family thing anymore, let alone the whole can I be excused from the dining room table. So that's one demonstration of the family, the importance of family in that time period. We also can see with everyone's concern when Beaver goes missing. Even the father, who seems to be less affectionate towards the children, even he participates in finding his son. We don't really know what time of day they might have been going looking for him. I didn't assume, or I don't think it was the end of school, although Wally was out of school, so perhaps it was. But you would still expect the father to be at work, and he was out looking for his son with the wife, the mother, and the older child. So it was fairly interesting to see that going on. And then of course you have just the relationships with the family members, the way that the wife, father and mother interact with each other is very affectionate. The mother's taking care of the children, the older brother acting as a role model for his younger brother. So the family, I think we can definitely see a change from them from back then to now. Education was kind of interesting. A lot of people mention this, and honestly, I never thought about how important the education was in this particular episode. But if you think about it, we start at a school and we end at a school, and almost the entire thing revolves around school, because the conflict of the episode is Beaver's possibly being expelled from school. So just that alone tells you how important education was, how he was afraid of not being able to go to school, likely because his parents would be upset, but I think he had his own fears of that as well. So something I noticed with this first, well, actually with both of these, and I just talked about some of the roles a little bit, so I'm going to throw this in to kind of summarize where we're at. A lot of you there was a conflict going on with whether we thought the American dream now was the same as it was back then. Some of you said yes, some of you said no. And it really opens up, for me anyway, it opens up the idea that the American dream is very subjective and personalized. So those of you that were saying that it hasn't changed that much, grew up in a family that operated in much the same way as the Leave It to Beaver family, as the Cleavers. And yes, his name was Beaver Cleaver. Interesting, right? And then those of you that say no, it doesn't exist in the same way, shape, or form as it did in the 1950s and 1960s, are perhaps grew up or existing in a family that is very different. And I think age plays into this too. We have quite an age range in this class, from 17, and I don't know how old some of the others of you are, but many of you have well-established families of your own. So age definitely plays into it as well, but for me it was just interesting to see some of you go one way and others go the other way. Personally, I might argue that we are not as far away from it as we think we might be. We still hold on to many of the same ideas, that a mother is the caretaker of the children, and a father should be working, right? The idea of Mr. Mom for many men, even if it's, you know, perfectly okay within their family structure that they need someone to stay home with the kids because of the cost of childcare, there's a stereotype that a Mr. Mom is not working because he's perhaps lazy or unemployable or something negative, when a woman who chooses to stay at home, on the other hand, is either believed to be a woman who doesn't want to advance herself, or on the flip side, it's often more accepted for a woman to stay at home. So we have all these different ideas of the gender roles, especially now, that we didn't have back then. I mean, it was really accepted for a woman to stay at home, but with the rise of feminism, not so much anymore. So those are my thoughts on last week. You guys can go and look at my comments. I know several of you commented on my comments, so I'm going to go back and look at some of those. I may choose to continue the discussion with them, or I may choose to let them stay as they are. Really, my questions are just to get you to think even more about what you've written and push these discussions further. Speaking of which, you guys are perfectly welcome to comment on each other's video or journal responses. I will say that it is not required at this time. That may change. But by commenting, what I'm finding for me is that it makes this class seem less impersonal, hence more personal. I get to talk with you guys more, get more of a sense of where your thoughts are headed, and it's closer to an in-class discussion than you would think an online class can get. So if you are watching someone's video one week or reading their journal, and something they say in their video or write in their journal speaks to you or makes you angry or draws your interest, whatever you want to say about it, do take a few moments to just write them a comment, and I'd love to see some little discussion threads get started on this page. So feel free to follow my example and comment on people's posts. I will say this may not happen every week. I wanted you guys to know from this first week that I do pay attention, that I watch everyone's video, all 5 awkward minutes of them. I read everyone's journal fully from beginning to end. So that's really my intent with the comments this week. From this point forward, I may not comment on everyone's posts. Doesn't mean I don't like you. It just means that something drew my interest enough to make it worth my time to stop and write something to them. So don't take it personally if you never get a comment from me. It's not against you. It's just what I have time to do and what moves me to write something. Okay? So I will take another pause here, and we're going to move on to what we are doing for this coming week. This week we are moving into our reading of our first novel. So we start Ragged Dick this week. So if you go to your syllabus and weekly schedule page for this week, the first thing that you'll notice is going to be, of course, watching this video. And then you're going to have 2 readings from Ragged Dick. The first one is actually a scanned copy of the introduction and preface to the hard copy version. So I know a lot of you either don't have your books or may have opted to not purchase the hard copy version of the text. So I've given you that introduction and preface. This is from the Signet Classics version of the book. Gives you some nice background into the author, the time period, and things like that. So do read it to get a little bit of an understanding of where we are, who is writing this, what purpose he might be writing for, things in his background that can really influence your interpretation of this novel. So there's a copy that you can get. It's linked on Laulima, also linked on our course page. So read that, I would suggest, obviously, before you start reading the book. And once you've read that, then we're going to jump into Ragged Dick with the first 50 pages or the first 7 chapters, depending on which version you're reading. So I have linked to the free e-text version on Gutenberg.org. I did receive an email this morning from someone saying that it did not work. I don't know if this was an isolated issue. I did send out the same link to my English 200, that's the face-to-face class I'm teaching this semester, and haven't heard anything, and I sent that to them last Thursday. So perhaps it's an isolated issue, but if you are having the same problem, I appreciate an email to let me know, and then I can try to remedy the problem. What I did was send out the direct link to this particular person, so it may be that I have to email everyone the direct link. Perhaps Laulima is not allowing it to work. So those first 50 pages really introduce us to the characters and get us into the first theme of that text that we'll be looking at in our assignments this week, and that's the idea of appearance, outward appearance versus inward character kind of thing in the text. So Ragged Dick is the first and foremost priority this week. Second priority is the craft of research. So this is the handbook that I showed you guys. So it's this guy, Craft of Research. We're reading pages 3 through 13, or part 1 prologue and chapter 1. So this is like an introduction to this text. We got the introduction to Ragged Dick, and now we got the introduction to Craft of Research. And so it's basically asking you questions like, what is research? Why do we do it? Why do we write research reports and that kind of stuff? So both of these readings this week get us into our next set of assignments. So our first assignment this week, depending on how you choose to tackle these, if you read Ragged Dick first, then you'll want to start with our video assignment. So this week what we're doing is picking up off of that appearance theme that I just mentioned a second ago. So if you look at the week 2 video, or video week 2 page, I give you a little bit of background about where we're going with this. So in Ragged Dick, things aren't always as they appear. From the very first scene, we have Dick being judged by the Spruce Street porter as a young vagabond who is lazy and a thief. This quickly changes, however, when Dick proves himself to have some good in him when he proclaims that "you don't catch me stealing. Lots of boys does it, but I wouldn't." I gotta love the dialect in here. So what I'm asking you to do then is to build off of this theme from that example I just gave you, and find more instances yourself where you see a conflict between a character's outward appearance and inner character. So I give you a big hint: don't just stick with Dick if you're looking at these things. They apply to many other characters in this story, so feel free to look at minor characters that might have some of this apply to them, and basically pull out passages that you see this outward appearance versus inner character being examined in or demonstrated in. And then the second part of this, so first part is to find similar passages that show the same theme, read them, and maybe give us a little bit of your explanation of how you saw that working. And then the second part is all about this idea of, again, outward appearance, but in a good way. So there is a passage you will get to on page 21, somewhere, I don't know how many chapters in this is, but Dick encounters Frank Whitney and his uncle, who goes by Mr. Whitney, and Frank's uncle, Mr. Whitney, describes Dick as looking honest and having an open face. And this is something I want you guys to think about. What does this even mean? How can Frank's uncle, Mr. Whitney, know what Dick is like from just looking at him? At this point, he doesn't really know this kid. He trusted him enough to let his nephew go out on the town with him, in New York of all places, which is, even in the 1860s, kind of hectic and perhaps not a very safe place. You'll see some incidences in the rest of the story that show what New York was like back then. So what I want you guys to think about in your video response then is, what does an open, honest face look like? And I want you to draw on your creative abilities if you have them, and if not, then draw on your research abilities, which we'll talk about for your next assignment this week, by either drawing a picture or finding a picture online of someone you would describe as honest. So drawing a picture, you can think of yourself as maybe a police sketch artist. Thinking about facial features, like the size of someone's eyes, the size of their nose, size of their mouth, shape of their eyebrows, the color of their eyes, their hair, their skin, shape of their face, things like that. Think about these details, even as you are looking for pictures online, if you choose to go that route. You can find a celebrity picture. Why might that celebrity be someone you believe to be honest? So this is not so much this celebrity has portrayed these kind of characters in films, although that might have some influence on you, but think more about just visual, the visual aspects of this honest face, rather than the prior knowledge you might already have about a person, right? Again, you want to put yourself in the same boat as Mr. Whitney would have been with Dick. He hadn't met him. He didn't know anything about his background. He's a street kid. Why would he have trusted Dick to go and take his nephew around town for a few hours? Okay? So again, you're either drawing me a picture or finding me a picture online of an honest person, a face you would describe as being honest. And then show us that picture. If you are tech savvy, you can somehow put a still picture in the middle of your video. If not, you can print up your image from online and hold it up to the camera. However you want to do this, I don't really care how technologically savvy you might be for this. But once you show us that picture, give us the description of why you think this person should be trusted. Again, eye color, hair color, shape of their eyebrows, size of their head, that kind of stuff. Weird things that we don't think about, but they're things we do subconsciously when we meet someone. How do we know that this is someone we should talk to and feel comfortable talking to before they even open their mouth to say anything to us? Okay, so that's your video response. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys come up with that one, and I'll tell you more about the science behind trustworthy faces next week when I do my review of what you guys talked about this week. But your second assignment for this week is based off of craft of research. So again, those first couple readings, the prologue of part 1 and chapter 1, are really basic about why we do what research is, why we do it, why we write reports about it. And they really make it seem as if research is something we only do in academics, when really it's not. We research all the time. And you're going to be sitting there watching this video going, I don't research all the time. I'm only researching because you're making me do it. But research is really any time you are looking up information. So you can be looking up a YouTube video on how to fix something in your house that's broken. You can be looking up a recipe on how to cook a new meal. You can be trying to do a Facebook search for someone you just met in one of your classes this week and you want to add them as a friend. All of that really counts as research, even though it doesn't seem like it. But what makes that kind of research different from what we do in academics is writing a research report. There are rules that you have to follow, a way you have to format your paper, the types of words you have to use, the way you have to structure your sentences, what information is valuable, what information is not. So when we do all of this kind of research report writing, which is what we'll be focusing on at the end of the semester, you enter into what's called a rhetorical community. And I'm taking this right off of my assignment post for this week. A rhetorical community is a group of people who share common interests, values, and goals. And that comes from Booth, Craft of Research, page 14. So for your journal response this week, I want you to think about those two things I just discussed. Think of a few times that you've researched something by your choice, not because I or another professor forced you into it. And just think about times you've researched over the last week or two. So you can go all the way back to Christmas. Maybe you were researching what to buy your son, daughter, little sister, little brother, whatever, big sister, big brother, something for Christmas. So you went to research it to figure out what to buy. That would count as an example in this case. Or I give you other ones: looking up an actor in a movie you watched, finding a long-lost friend on Snapchat, or researching whether or not to take this class with me, even though I don't really want to know what you researched. Okay? So tell me about at least two of these everyday research experiences. And then I want you to pick one and briefly report your findings in a way that speaks to a specific rhetorical community. So you're going to have to think about your audience in this case. Who would even care about whatever it is that you researched? So the rhetorical community you want to imagine can be anything, any community you think is relevant to this particular research. So if you're researching whether or not to take this class, it can be a group of students that are going to be taking English 200 in the next year or two, and you want to tell them whether or not you think they should take it with me or with someone else. If you're trying to convince a friend to go with you to a movie that you've been wanting to see, think about how you might convince them of going with you. If it's a horror movie and they hate horror movies, you really have to work hard. So what do you tell them to get them to go with you? Okay, so basically writing up a report, which a report can be a conversation that you might have. A report can be basically a review of a class, whatever you might want. Consider the values, interests, and goals that the rhetorical community you're reporting to might have, and work them into your stylistic choices in your report of whatever you've researched. And then after you write that report, explain to me why you made those choices that you did. Why'd you use that specific term? Why'd you leave out certain information? Why did you use short or long sentences or have a bunch of different paragraphs? Okay, so all of this, I would say, try to accomplish it in 1 to 2 double-spaced pages, equivalent. And some of you were posting your journal responses last week and ran into issues with formatting. When I say the equivalent of 1 to 2 double-spaced pages, I mean equivalent because when you try to paste it into the comments box, the double spaces may or may not show up. So it can be frustrating, and it doesn't have to be formatted perfectly because WordPress isn't going to let you do it. Okay, so that's this week's assignments. And we'll be getting into the nitty-gritty of this course starting this week. So I really look forward to hearing what you guys think about Ragged Dick, about research, and the starting point that we're beginning at, because we will definitely not be at this point by the time we get to that long paper at the end of the semester. So looking forward to seeing what you guys do this week, and I will see you in next week's video.